Congress finally came together to do something near unanimously to address the housing crisis by passing the Housing for the 21st Century Act, both through the House and most recently through the Senate. The only problem is they identified the wrong problems contributing to the housing crisis and therefore came up with a series of fixes that address the wrong problem. Let's dive in. So this is introduced a few months ago, December 2025, passed this month, March 2026. The incredible support from both sides of the aisle. House vote 390 to 9, Senate vote 89 to 10. This has a ton of support from everyone as it is intended to address the housing crisis. The method behind it, with their stated purpose here at the top of the bill, is it says to increase the supply of housing in America and for other purposes. The initial bill, I think when it went through the House, was 6 titles. This one grew to 11 sections, which are now titled Title 1 through 11. And I want to dive into a few of the more interesting and impactful ones, starting off with Title 2, which the subheading is Building More in America. One of the major provisions in Title 2 is that the HUD must create national guidelines and best practices for state and local zoning reforms within 3 years. These guidelines may not be able to compel states and local governments to follow these guidelines, but they do have the ability to potentially withhold funding if these guidelines are not met. That is the way of controlling the purse strings to compel compliance, even if you can't otherwise force a state or local government to follow it. So what would these guidelines look? One of the first focuses is increasing housing density through smaller lots, taller buildings, and reduced setbacks. If you are a property owner already looking at potentially doing some revisions to your property, this might be interesting where you can, in theory, over the next few years, be able to build a taller building than what your local guidances may allow you to do currently and build closer to your property line. One of the reasons that this is less popular than you might otherwise think is that your neighbors can also do the same thing. They can build bigger, they can build taller, and they can come nearer to your property line. There are also an interesting statement in the guidelines regarding parking reforms, where they are looking at reducing or eliminating parking minimums for neighborhoods. So you can build taller, you can build wider, you can take up more of your property, you can even subdivide into smaller lots, and you don't have to meet any parking minimums or guidelines because those are going away in order to help neighborhoods become more populous and dense. We're going to get into an example of why I don't like that as a practice. The guidelines must also include the legalization of ADUs and to allow duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes by right, which essentially means you don't have to go through a complicated study or an approval process. You just have the right to be able to convert your single-family residence into duplex, triplex, or fourplex, or quadplex. It's also to encourage the manufactured and modular housing. So we're going to go through a little bit of a hypothetical. You have a neighborhood with 100 homes. Only 10% choose to add an ADU, 10% convert to a duplex, 10% convert to a triplex, and 10% convert to a quadplex. That neighborhood will now have 170 homes with no additional parking or infrastructure. So you have a 70% increase in one neighborhood with nowhere to park. Also, some of these will be families with kids. Where do they go to school? If somebody gets sick, do we have the hospitals and the nursing staff and the doctors to be able to support it? Do we have groceries for them? Do we have the energy? Do we have enough clean water? Do we have enough waste management and other city services to be able to support a 70% increase in housing in one area? What does that do for the neighborhood dynamics as well? So a lot of the suburban neighborhoods enjoy their peace and quiet, but then if you double or if you just massively increase the population within that neighborhood, the dynamics change. The noise goes up, the garbage goes up. I don't know. There's a lot of issues with massively increasing population density. If you're in Orange County, like I am, LA County, San Diego, San Francisco, we already have overly dense populations. There are parts of California and parts of the United States in which adding some population density might be a good idea. But if you don't have the supporting infrastructure to accommodate a 50% or 100% increase in the amount of humans per square foot or per square mile, it's going to lead to more problems than just leaving this well enough alone. There are some things in Title II that I do like. So the guidelines must include cost-effective and appropriate building codes. mechanisms to preserve affordability, limit disruption of low-income communities, and prevent displacement of existing residents. Also, the standardization, reduction, or elimination of impact fees. Again, these are just going to be guidelines. So it doesn't mean that any of these things that are being recommended by HUD are actually going to be put into effect. But those do sound good if they actually end up leading to anything significant. Other provisions. This is one that's fascinating. We're going to come back to in a second, but pre-approved architectural plans that can be built by right, aka pattern books. Also, streamlining environmental reviews for 1 to 4 unit projects and office to residential conversions. Also very interesting with the current climate. Then increased FHA multifamily mortgage insurance limits. The architectural pattern books, we're going to talk about modular manufactured homes here in a second, but I love this idea. So I do a lot of commercial and industrial construction. I'm on a project that's a little bit over $2 billion right now. Pattern books and pre-approved plans are very common to where you can say, here's a typical dimension and typical architectural design that we're going to use on every project from here on out. And so you can kind of copy and paste certain elements of how you intend to build a building from one project to the next. You have to redesign them all from scratch. That means the approval process goes more quickly, and it costs a lot less money because you're spending less time and effort and manpower in the design portion of it. Why shouldn't you be able to do that with a home? Something has been engineered in such a way to where the building works. Why not take that one design and then use it as a pattern book to be able to apply to multiple different neighborhoods? As long as it meets the local codes, why not? So to recap Title II, this is a solution that causes a slew of new problems. Increasing population density requires additional infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, freeways, utilities, etc. Let's dive into Title III, which is manufactured housing for America. The provisions, they have this broken down into different sections with Section 301 focusing on manufactured homes. This removes a permanent chassis requirement, creates standards for chassis-free manufactured homes, and requires states to treat them equally, chassis or no chassis. The goal of these three is to remove outdated federal definitions that restrict manufactured housing, therefore to make manufactured housing more common, more acceptable by local governments. Section 302, very similar, but this time a focus on modular homes. So it's a review of FHA construction loan programs to better fit modular building schedules, because most of the money is going to have to be fronted up front to release materials. Also to assess alternate financing structures for modular housing, to explore creating a national standardized modular building code. And the purpose of this section is to make modular housing easier to produce, purchase, and inspect. Think about this, how this ties into those pattern books. So again, a company, let's say you're a Toll Brothers or one of the bigger builders out there, you can create a pattern book of an accepted, architecturally engineered, structurally compliant building or a home in different models. Normally those end up being stick built on site. So you have to mobilize local crews to be able to build whatever you're building on a variety of sites all throughout the country. What this could facilitate is either a manufactured home or a modular home to build most of these units offsite in a controlled environment with a controlled cost, with one crew doing the same work over and over and over again. So it's more of a controlled construction process. That has a lot of benefits. What you'd essentially rely on is a lot of local construction companies to do the on-site roughing, the grading, foundations, roughing utilities, then build a pattern book modular home offsite, wheel it in, lift it up with a little crane, drop it on its foundation, tie in all the utilities that have been roughed in, and voila, you have a house. It would streamline the process in incredible ways, and then also allow for more controlled manufacturing processes offsite, so you're not fully reliant on the quality of local construction companies. It's a fascinating idea. This is the one that I'm the biggest fan of. I think it's a great idea. So yeah, Title III recap, by far my favorite part of the bill. It seeks to remove roadblocks and make it easier for alternative housing construction methods to take off. It should increase innovation, reduce construction costs, and could dramatically alter the housing industry in a positive way. Title IV, if you are mortgage or lending, this should freak you out a little bit. I have not seen this addressed elsewhere, but stick with me on this. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive because it is important to look at the actual language. Section 401, creating incentives for small dollar loan originators.
The government is looking at the fact that mortgage companies don't want to lend, uh, they don't want to produce mortgages for under $100,000 because there's no money in there. So the government is actively taking a look at what can we change in order to create incentives for lenders to produce more small dollar amount mortgages. This will have unintended consequences. So let's look at Section B, the requirement regarding loan originator compensation practices. So not later than 270 days after the date of enactment of this bill, the director shall submit to the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs of the Senate and the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives a report on loan originator compensation practices throughout the residential mortgage market. Look a little bit further down, Section D, rulemaking. Following the issuance of the report required under subsection B, the director may issue regulations to clarify the forms of compensation a lender may use to compensate a loan originator. This might not seem like a big deal, but I want to run you through a hypothetical. So let's say after doing this research, the director deems loan originator compensation unfairly discriminates against mortgage applications under $100,000. To fix this, the director sets minimum and maximum caps on compensation, something along the lines of each loan. We're going to get rid of the percentage-based commission structure and just make it a $2,000 flat fee, because that way mortgage companies and loan originators won't unfairly discriminate against small dollar mortgage applications anymore. This would be an incredible change to the mortgage industry, to how lending companies make their money, to how lenders make their money, to how brokerages run. And this is a pathway created through this bill. If you were to think about like the National Association of Realtors settlement recently, the government is actively looking at the housing market and how to reduce costs. So there is active litigation and a settlement recently with the realtors to make the compensation structure a little bit more flexible. And now they're looking at doing a similar thing with mortgages. So if you're lending, there is danger in the language in this bill, because in order to increase the availability of small dollar mortgages, which are virtually non-existent in California, this bill provides the director of the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection the ability to create new regulations regarding lender compensation. This is the type of language that gets hidden in larger bills that everyone's really excited about passing, that can come back to haunt and massively disrupt our industry. The next one I want to take a look at is Title IX, which is homeownership for Main Street America. This is the one where I think everyone's patting themselves on the back about how amazing this is going to be. Yeah, I don't think it's actually going to accomplish anything. So the provisions, diving into the provisions, the goal in Title IX is to make it easier for Main Street America to buy affordable homes by disallowing large institutional investors from purchasing single-family homes. The reality is probably won't change anything at all. Let's dive into why. So in the provision, Section B, it's prohibition on purchases by large institutional investors. In general, no large institutional investor may purchase or enter into a contract to directly or indirectly purchase any single-family home. The exception is the prohibition under paragraph 1 shall not apply to, let's go to B, any purchase of a single-family home in connection with a restructuring or other reorganization of ownership of single-family homes that were owned or purchased on or before the date of enactment of this act. We've read through legal notices before or bills. They are wordy and confusing. Let's take a look at how large institutional investors are defined. So a large institutional investor means an investment fund, corporation, general or limited partnership, limited liability company, joint venture, association, or other for-profit entity that is a legal entity structured in a manner that is not aforementioned, that is engaged in whole or in part in the business of investing in, owning, renting, managing, holding single-family homes, and alone or in concert with one or more other entities beginning after the date of enactment of this act, directly or indirectly has investment control of not less than 350 single-family homes in the aggregate, not including any single-family home purchased and an accepted purchase made after the date of the enactment of this act. What does any of that mean? So the government is zeroing in on large institutional investors that own 350 or own or control 350 or more single-family residences, to disallow them from purchasing, which sounds great.
So you have the government going after Wall Street, after these big companies that are driving up prices. The reality is this really won't do anything. So going through our list here of the issues with this, large institutional investors are estimated to own about 3% of single family homes. Investors will not be compelled to sell. So nothing in this language says that they can't own them. They just can't purchase any more directly. If you go to issue number 3, one of the loopholes here is that large institutional investors can still purchase companies that own homes. So if you were to look at like BlackRock owns thousands of homes. They are a large institutional investor. The way that they own their homes and purchase their homes is it doesn't say like BlackRock Incorporated is purchasing a home. They have an incredible series of LLCs and smaller companies that make these ownership purchases in a variety of homes. And so oftentimes an LLC will own 3, 5, 10 homes, and that's about it. So what's to stop BlackRock from continuing to do that? Because you have these LLCs that will be funded that can just sell their company and therefore their properties to these large institutional investors. It's one of the primary loopholes and one of the primary issues with the language in this bill is that these large institutional investors have a really simple backdoor. Other backdoors or loopholes would be that investors can create nonprofits. It's a great way to make it look like these big companies are trying to go out of their way to help Main Street America by saying that, hey, this portion of homes that we're buying, so we're going to buy 100 or 1,000 homes, we are going to reduce the rents of them to be a nonprofit entity. And then voila, for that nonprofit arm of the company, because that is excluded, they can go ahead and continue purchasing homes. And then they just create new companies. It gives a lot of off ramps for large institutional investors to continue to add on to their portfolio. There's nothing to compel them to sell any of the homes that are still in their portfolio. If you think of the other single family homes that are owned by investors that are not large institutional investors, that's like another 27% of the market. It's a much larger percentage than the percentage of large institutional investors. The other way that I would go about this is if I'm BlackRock and I want to continue buying homes, is you just move away from single family homes and go into multifamily. Or you buy a lot that's zoned for a single family, create it a multifamily. You can just buy a whole bunch of duplexes and triplexes, or buy and start to convert them over to be able to add more properties into the mix. Again, it sounds great. It sounds like the government is going after Wall Street in favor of Main Street, that they're protecting us by fighting corporate America, but this will not make any meaningful difference in housing supply. There's a much easier, better way by introducing a few different taxes, both on the purchase of a non-owner occupied single family home and by instituting, like, let's say a 1% additional property tax, which would reduce the cap rates for all these companies. I've gone over this in previous videos, but there's a much easier, better way that would make a much larger difference. But instead we get Title IX. The overall recap of this entire bill is it's near unanimous and it has a ton of bipartisan support. On the one hand, I'm so grateful that our government is actually starting to work together. They're seeing an issue and they're coming together across the aisle to try to fix it. The issue is that I don't think they understand the problem. I don't think they understand what's going on with housing. We do not have a lack of homes. We have a lack of available homes. It sounds similar, but it's a wildly different problem. And this bill does not address the available homes. Investors can still purchase up 30 to 50% of the new inventory that will be created. And so therefore, this is a bill that fixes problems we don't have. And it should result in higher density neighborhoods, which for where I live, this is not popular. Nobody wants to see our neighborhood of 100 homes add another 30, 50, 70 families or corporate investors, or to see a bunch of homes converted from single family residences to fourplexes where God only knows what that's going to do to the neighborhood, to the school system. Should make manufactured modular homes more common. For some people, that's a huge negative. I think this is a good thing. It should provide alternatives to construction and stick-built, local, messy construction processes, which I think is a good thing. Again, I have a lot of experience in residential construction. I've also worked on my largest project right now is a $2 billion project over at LAX. This is a good thing. This is modernizing, keeping with the times, and allowing some innovation in the construction industry. This will, this may impact lending compensation. The director of the Consumer of Financial Protection is most likely going to use this opportunity to come after the lending industry and say, you got to reduce your compensation because that'll help homeowners have a better deal. Very similar to the litigation that's happened with the National Association of Realtors. I would expect it of us in the lending industry. But this may also lead to greater housing supply in the long term. I don't think it'll fix anything now, but it should have some reduced roadblocks with environmental reviews and impact reviews, which in the long term should create greater housing supply. Now, there's another way of looking at it that this may create oversupply, what the Chinese real estate market has gone through recently. But I don't want to get that far into the future or that far into the weeds quite yet. So if you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from our community. We're also going to be launching a private community here pretty soon for professionals through the California housing industry. So if you have questions about that, there are links down in the description below. So please feel free to reach out and get some additional information. I'm Nathan with the California Housing Collective. I'd love to do this for you guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you.